Yes, it's true. I have never seen a Mission Impossible movie before. But with the release of Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning coming out this month, I figured that now would be a perfect opportunity to speed run through the entire franchise. That way I can truly experience it and appreciate it for all its glory. Now, I am aware about a lot of the tropes in the movies. I'm aware about the theme song. I'm aware about the masks. I'm aware about the stunts. And I know about the running. But I've actually never sat down to watch any of these movies before until recently. And here are my thoughts on them. Going into this, I wasn't really sure what to expect out of these movies, so I'm really going to be looking at the action and set pieces, the stunts, the running, the cool spy stuff, and any other miscellaneous things that I noticed while watching these movies. I'm not going to be focusing on the plot too much because honestly, doesn't really matter. That's not why these movies are made, and I'm assuming that you've already seen these movies if you're watching this video. Also, I'm going to be interchanging character and actor names throughout this entire video, so I hope you can keep up. And if you're wondering why I sound like this, I'm going through a little bit of a cold, so apologies in advance for me sounding weird. The first Mission Impossible movie came out in 1996, which is insane because that means with the release of this movie coming out this month, this franchise spans nearly 30 years, all with the same lead actor. I don't think that's ever been done before. The only thing close that I can think of is the Fast and Furious franchise, but that first movie came out in 2001 and it's still ongoing, so we'll see. I just thought I'd mention that because that's insane that Tom Cruise has been doing these movies for this long. Anyway, the first movie was a lot more reserved than I thought it was going to be, but I still thought it was pretty good. This is the blueprint of what these movies would go on to become. There's a lot of suspense and tension, fake outs, gadgets, betrayal, and mistrust. The story is about IMF agent Ethan Hunt, who has been disavowed and he is believed to be a mole in their organization after one of their operations goes south, resulting in the death of his team, leaving him to be the only survivor. Or so he thought. Ethan tries to recover the knock list, a list of all the secret agents associated with the IMF, to help clear his name. I finally got to see the famous wire drop scene in its entirety. Tom Cruise running, the introduction of Luther. I didn't realize Ving Rhames has been in these movies as long as he has, since the beginning, and the idea that characters can die in this franchise. I was really surprised towards the beginning of the movie that pretty much all the IMF crew were killed in action, setting the precedent that these characters can die in these movies. But to me, it was pretty obvious that Jon Voight faked his death because we don't see who killed him, and they're not going to cast somebody like him in this movie for 5 minutes. There's also a real feeling of espionage and not knowing who to trust because Tom Cruise ends up recruiting a new team to steal the knock list, and Franz and Claire both end up betraying him in the end. Once Jon Voight and Claire end up surviving the initial attack and come back, it was pretty obvious that they were the bad guys. They also end up dying, leaving just Tom Cruise and Luther by the end of the movie. I think the masks are pretty cool in this movie because it's not like an exact copy of the person they're trying to impersonate, but it's real prosthetics that they're wearing in universe to pull off this job. That's something we won't really see again after this movie. I'm not saying that I think this version of these masks are better or worse. I just appreciate the quaintness of this effect. That's all I'm saying. Tom Cruise runs pretty early on in this movie, which is another staple that I didn't realize was established this early into the franchise. In this movie, he's running in a foggy, dreamy, blue lit location that's just so 1990s. I love it. I also love right after this scene when he calls up the agency for backup. There's these security questions and code words that he has to talk in and answer to. There aren't really any super crazy stunts in this movie. The only thing I noticed was the running away from the exploding fish tank in the restaurant. It doesn't really look that impressive, but there's so much water that you could easily get hit by. It could easily knock you down with some force. Also, more running. There's a train sequence at the end of this movie that doesn't hold up super well in some parts, but I still thought it was a pretty cool action sequence nonetheless. Here are some miscellaneous things that I noticed while watching this movie. This is prime 1990s, so the internet really isn't a thing, but I just found it really entertaining that Tom Cruise starts typing into the computer, and what he searches for is just crazy. He searches the Book of Job, he searches Max.com. Like, there was just crazy things that he searches in this movie that get no results, also. I just found that very, very 1990s. There's also some really just intense and bizarre camera angles that come out of nowhere when they're in the restaurant. Like these angles that are shooting like right up underneath the actor at like these crazy Dutch angles. It just caught me off guard. And I don't know, that was just something that I noticed and stuck out to me. So I had to mention it here. Overall, I give this movie like 3 out of 5 stars. It's nothing too crazy or complicated, but I still think it holds up pretty well today. Mission Impossible 2. I feel like no one really talks about this movie when they mention the Mission Impossible franchise, and I kind of get why. This movie is wildly different from not only the first movie, but from every other movie that comes out after this. The movie is about stopping a rogue IMF agent who plans to steal a new virus that a company was planning to release, infecting millions, and selling that cure for the virus that they also made. But it goes in a completely different direction, tone-wise, from the last movie. Instead of a paranoid espionage thriller where we don't really know what characters to trust, Mission Impossible 2 is much more of a straightforward, action-packed movie. This movie was directed by John Woo, who is known for his gun-heavy action movies, and he definitely brought his directing style to this franchise. I could be wrong, but I think the only time someone shoots a gun in the first movie is Jon Voight at the end when he shoots his wife. And in this movie, John Woo's like, nah, fuck that. Tom Cruise, you're getting 2 guns. Like, this is such a 2000s cool guy action movie. There's still moments of suspense. It's just more entwined with the action, I'd say. There's also a lot more slow-mo in this movie. Limp Bizkit and Metallica are on the soundtrack. There's a lot more sex appeal. Like, Tom Cruise is f***ing in this movie. And honestly, I don't think he's ever looked better in a movie. Bro's got a nice Australian tan, abs, long flowing hair. Like, what is going on with his hair? It's crazy. Like, I did not think Tom Cruise would have hair like this. It looks great. It looks fantastic. He's doing cool flips and kicks, and it's always like bouncing right back into place. I can't get enough of it. I love it. And I would say this is the start of Tom Cruise doing insane stunts for these movies. He was actually freehand climbing in this introduction scene. It looks like he did a fair bit of motorcycle driving towards the end. And in the final fight scene where the knife gets super close to his eye, the blade is like literally touching his eyelashes. That's a real knife. Tom Cruise actually doesn't do a whole lot of running in this movie, unfortunately. I think he replaces most of that with climbing, which I don't think is as fun. This is also when they start to change the effect behind the masks to make them a lot more photorealistic. Some miscellaneous notes I have for this movie. I already mentioned Tom Cruise's hair. I love it. Anthony Hopkins is in this movie. Like, what? Why? He's only in this movie. Love to see him, but I don't know. I feel like he was underutilized. Again, this is an older movie, so technology and computers aren't really like up to what they are now. And there's a scene that caught my eye where this guy is typing, standing up, one-handed. That just seemed, I don't know, so unrealistic to me. I just had to mention it here. I also feel that Tom Cruise should have been the one to ride the red motorcycle in the end of this movie. I don't know why that like upsets me, but He should, right? That just makes more sense. Anyway, this movie is pretty over the top. It takes itself pretty seriously, and it's just such a product of its time. But I think that adds a lot of the charm to this movie. They would never make a movie like this today, and I think that's why I like it so much. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, this is the movie that really changed up the franchise, not just from a quality standpoint, but from a story perspective as well. This film continues classic tropes of the series like realistic masks, great action and suspense, espionage, betrayal, and mistrust, but it also subverts expectations in other ways, like never actually revealing what the plot device of this movie, The Rabbit's Foot, is or what it does. All the IMF know is that a terrorist has it and plans to use it, which is bad news for the rest of the world. Another way this film subverts from the franchise is by putting the character of Ethan Hunt in a much different place than the last two movies. Ethan Hunt has quit the IMF and is engaged to his bride-to-be, Michelle Monaghan. He's living and loving the suburban life. He's intense about traffic.
Let's study traffic patterns. You hit the brakes for a second, just tap them on the freeway. You can literally track the ripple effect of that action across a 200-mile stretch of road because traffic has a memory. It's amazing. It's like a living organism.
I'd marry him.
I would too.
And he's eavesdropping on his wife's conversations by reading their lips.
Hey, Monica. Monica.
Thank you. He heard that?
How did you hear that?
But he's actually not as done with the life as he thought, because once he hears that his former IMF partner has gone missing, he gets back in the game to bring her back. This movie refines the over-the-top action from the last movie by making it feel a lot more tactical. The scene where Hunt and his team rescue Agent Ferris uses remote-controlled turrets, magnetic grenades, and just feels a lot more militaristic. They get her on the helicopter, evade the enemy helicopter that's pursuing them, and just when you think they're in the clear and safe to get the explosive out of her head, it detonates, killing her instantly. Jesus Christ, this is such a good scene. The abruptness of her death hits you like a ton of bricks, and this furthers the notion that anyone can die in these movies. This is a great scene, but the cold open to this movie is even better. Talk about a powerful hook. Immediately, we're thrown into one of the most tense scenes I've ever seen in my life. Building and building the tension while we're trying to piece together what the hell Philip Seymour Hoffman is talking about.
You don't think I'll do it? Where is it?
I have no idea, Jesus Christ, chill out. Philip Seymour Hoffman is great in this movie, and I wish we got to see a little bit more from him. I think he's easily the most frightening and convincing antagonist in any of these movies. The scene that stands out and solidifies this point for me is after they replace and kidnap him, they have him tied up in a plane trying to interrogate him. He is not intimidated or threatened at all. In fact, he is super intimidating in this scene by ignoring all of Ethan Hunt's questions and asks him if he has a girlfriend because he's going to do terrible things to her once he escapes. To the point where Ethan goes all Batman on him and attempts to scare him by opening the hatch with him hanging out of it. Ethan ends up getting nothing out of him, but Philip Seymour Hoffman gets his name, and that's all he needs. And from the cold open, you know he's going to capture her, and this just sent chills down my spine after he says,
"What I'm selling, and who I'm selling to, is the last thing you should be concerned about. Ethan."
We're just getting closer and closer to that fatal scene. There's also some great twists in this movie. It's revealed in that scene where Ethan's wife is killed that they actually switched with Philip Seymour Hoffman's assistant because she failed him. I should have known because they do a mask switch with duct tape over the mouth in Mission Impossible 2. Also, earlier in the movie, Ethan receives a video message from Agent Ferris saying that she believes Lawrence Fishburne is working with Philip Seymour Hoffman, but the mole was actually revealed to be Billy Crudup. Again, I'm sorry, I don't be knowing the names of these characters. There's also a pretty crazy stunt in this movie. Tom Cruise swings from skyscrapers in China because it's the only way to get inside the building, of course. I feel like this stunt kind of goes under the radar, but he's hundreds of feet up in the air and he just jumps off the building and starts swinging over the street. Plus, there's a little line from Luther after he does this, which I quite enjoyed, just letting us know that he's aware of his plot armor.
I knew he'd make it.
There's a great running scene in this movie as well. Definitely one of his longest. It's towards the end where Simon Pegg. Oh, yeah, Simon Pegg. This is the first time he's in these movies. So, yeah, there we go. He has to direct Ethan Hunt to the actual location of his wife. He runs a very long way, yelling in Chinese at civilians to watch out and get out of the way. How many languages does Ethan Hunt know? I'm not really sure, but I think he speaks every language. And I gotta also talk about the masks in this movie. There's a pretty cool scene where Tom Cruise puts on Philip Seymour Hoffman's mask and it blends the practical mask and CGI pretty well. And then it gets replaced with Philip Seymour Hoffman somewhere in between all that. I will say, even though I commented on how I like the practical prosthetics in the first movie, pretty much every mask scene from this movie forward has some pretty cool mask trickery where I end up scratching my head wondering how they did that. Anyways, now for the miscellaneous notes. There's kind of a strange line about chocolate in this movie that I didn't quite understand. It's when Lawrence Fishburne, in his first scene, I believe, and he's kind of addressing how they all messed up. He says this.
It's unacceptable that chocolate makes you fat, but I've eaten my share, and guess what?
And I'm not sure what that means. Is he saying that he's fat? Because he's not fat, you know? It's just such an odd thing to say. I was very confused by this line. Let me know in the comments if I'm just an idiot and can't understand this, or just tell me what this means, please. There's also a pretty corny line that really doesn't make any sense from Tom Cruise. It's when they do the Italian job. Tom Cruise scales the wall and does a roll on top of the wall and says,
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall.
Like, what? Why did he say that? What compelled him to say that? I refuse to believe that that was in the script. And if it was, shame on you. I mentioned how Ethan Hunt is kind of like Batman in this movie. And there are two other examples that kind of propel that notion. He picks locks twice. Once with wires. He breaks into the apartment with wires, and he also picks handcuff locks with a pen. How can he do that? I don't know. I just thought that was very interesting. He can just pick a lock with any household item, I guess. There is also a brilliant shot that broke my brain in this movie. It's right before Tom Cruise does the stunt in China. There's a sweeping helicopter shot of him on the building, and the camera swoops around his shoulder and goes behind him. Then Luther steps up and then the camera is in front of them. How did they do that? I just saw that. I had to rewind it and just had to stare at it in awe because I was like, but how did they do this? And finally, in this movie, we have somebody that laughs at the idea of the IMF.
It's called IMF.
What does that stand for?
Impossible Mission Force.
Shut up.
It's mentioned in the first movie that IMF stands for Impossible Mission Force. Excuse me, what? I had no idea that that was what this secret agency was. I just thought that Tom Cruise worked just for the government or the CIA or something. I didn't know it was this fictional sector of the government called the Impossible Mission Force. That is ridiculous. I had no idea that was the agency that these movies are based off of. And I know that this movie franchise is based off of a TV show from the 60s So I kind of get that, but I remember hearing that in the first movie, Impossible Mission Force, and I wanted to turn it off. I was like, what? There's no way. Anyway, this is also J.J. Abrams' feature film directorial debut, and no wonder he's one of the biggest producers in Hollywood right now. They let this man cook. I really liked this movie, and I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is another movie that I really enjoyed. Even though there's no Luther in this movie, not until the end, I think this has a really strong cast, great action and stunts, and cool spy trickery. The plot of this movie is that the Kremlin is bombed and nuclear codes are taken, so to try to avoid a nuclear war, the president enacts Ghost Protocol, and the IMF secretary tells them to not handle this. Wink, wink. So this group doesn't have the wide, vast resources of the IMF, yet it's the biggest stakes so far. There's a lot more emotional and personal depth in this story, which I appreciate. Agent Jane Carter's partner was killed in action by the assassin that they're trying to catch, so there's a feeling of revenge throughout this movie. Agent Carter and Ethan Hunt connect a little bit because they can both relate to losing their spouse in one way or another, and I kind of wanted them to end up together after their kiss that was just a hunch.
I'm playing a hunch. Don't hit me.
But I also like how they kind of didn't fully go in that route and they went their separate ways in the end of the movie. Jeremy Renner also has a connection to Ethan Hunt because he was there when his wife was killed, so he's carrying this guilt throughout this movie until the end where it's revealed that she's actually alive and they just faked her death. Which is nice, but Ethan can't ever be with her, which is kind of why I wanted him to end up with Agent Carter, because they're both IMF agents who have lost their partner. It was said in the last movie by Luther that the IMF can't have any type of relationship, and I think this movie kind of confirms that. If you try to have someone outside the life, that's not going to work. And if you try to have something within the agency, it's very possible that you lose that person in the field. Kind of a sad message. This movie has probably the most memorable stunt from the franchise, and that's Tom Cruise climbing the Burj Khalifa. And I think this is the movie that started the trend where the selling point of these movies are the absolute insane stunts Tom Cruise will do for you, the audience. The technicality of these stunts have been talked to death, so I won't go too deep into that, but Jesus Christ, when the camera pans over his shoulder and shows the height, that makes my heart drop to my ass. In fact, I love the entirety of this hotel set piece. The idea that this crew needs to make two people feel like they made a deal for new codes, even though they never met each other, is such an interesting idea. And the way it's executed is so much fun to watch. The way that they transfer the diamonds from seller to buyer is so sick, and so is the way that they actually print the launch codes. It escalates to the seller realizing that they're actually spies, and Agent Carter ends up kicking her off the building. She got her revenge. I also love the fact that since they're in Ghost Protocol and they don't have all the resources in the world, they're in a bit of a pinch, so when things go wrong, they just kind of have to throw their hands up and improvise. There's so many things that go wrong and they just have to deal with it and hope for the best. Tom Cruise runs for a long time. Honestly, the whole chase scene in the sandstorm is pretty cool, and I appreciate Ethan Hunt's dedication to the mission, but I think it goes on just a bit too long. Like he's running and then they do a car chase and then a lot more running. It's just a lot, I think. Just a bit. Also, this movie doesn't have any masks. Tom Cruise wears actual prosthetics when he's imitating the Russian officer, and later in the movie, when they attempt to intercept the deal in the hotel, their mask machine is broken, causing them to improvise, which I think serves the story really well. And for some miscellaneous notes, I was a bit concerned towards the beginning of the movie when I saw Tom Cruise's haircut. To be honest, I didn't really like it. But when he shows up in Dubai, and he starts running. It's got some nice bounce, got some nice flow. I thought it was the worst haircut, but it ended up being one of his better looks, in my opinion. Speaking of earlier in the movie, the scene where Tom Cruise is in a Russian prison, he's throwing a rock around his cell and it's coming back to his hand. I had to rewind it because it sounded like a rock, but I was like, surely he can't do that. I thought it was a ball. You know, people do that sometimes. It's a common trope in like jail or prison scenes where they throw a ball around their cell and it comes back to them. You know, that's what I thought he was doing. He's throwing a rock and it's like perfectly bouncing back to him. That's crazy. That's insane. This is a movie where I think Tom Cruise or Ethan Hunt kind of steps up his Batman isms. He can pretty much do anything. We already established that he can read lips. He reads lips again in this movie, and he can pick a lock with anything. He picks a lock with a paperclip in this movie. He can also draw perfect portraits from memory onto his hand. Maybe they're not perfect. Maybe they're a little crude.
Crude drawing, but by your description, that could be Kurt Hendricks.
But they're good enough that an IMF agent can identify that person. That's insane. So he's just like good at everything. He can just like do anything. He can jump off of and scale tall buildings, and he can also draw realistic doodles of people on his hand. Like, who is this guy? When they're invading the Kremlin, there's a cool lockpick that they have. It kind of looks like Sudoku, like a little Sudoku puzzle. That's fun. Also, this is more like a question for the fans or whoever. Who makes the mission checkpoints? Like, who makes those things in the real world? Like the telephone that he goes up to that starts smoking, or the camera. There's a retinal scan connected to a boxcar. Like, who's making this stuff? That's what I want to see. The IMF team has to pack light from the boxcar headquarters that they have. And I'm wondering if Tom Cruise knew that he was going to climb that building because he packed a pair of little knee-high pants. And I'm just wondering, does he always pack those? Does he always have those just in case he's going to climb a large building? Or did he just have a vision that he was going to climb the world's tallest building one way or another, whether he needed to or not? He just packed those knee-high pants. Thought that was kind of fun to think about, you know? This is the only movie that references the fuse in the title sequence.
Light the fuse.
It's mentioned in the actual movie, and then it transitions into the title sequence. I thought that was pretty fun. There's another corny line said by Tom Cruise in this movie. Right at the end of the movie where he's going to shut down the nuke, he says,
Mission accomplished.
and when he tells Luther about that after this, he gives him the middle finger. So that's fun. It's good to see their friendship is stronger than ever. Anyway, this is Brad Bird's live action directorial debut. Before this, he was known for movies like The Iron Giant, The Incredibles, and Ratatouille. But thank God they let him cook in the live action world with this movie. 4.5 out of 5 stars. This movie is called Rogue Nation, which is slightly confusing because Ethan Hunt goes rogue in nearly every movie up until this point. He goes rogue in Mission Impossible 1 because the IMF thinks he's a mole, so he has to go rogue to clear his name. He doesn't go rogue in Mission Impossible 2. In fact, the main antagonist is the one who goes rogue, and he's the IMF agent who is tasked to stop him. But he goes rogue in Mission Impossible 3 almost immediately after coming back from retirement to capture Philip Seymour Hoffman without the approval of Lawrence Fishburne. Yes, Billy Crudup is helping him, but he's actually secretly gone rogue himself. So, yeah. In Ghost Protocol, the IMF is technically disbanded, so he has no choice but to go rogue to save the world. And in this movie, he goes rogue again. This time, the CIA has shut down the IMF and has been trying to catch him for months. I know Rogue Nation refers to the Syndicate, but I don't know if this was the best title because Ethan Hunt has been going rogue. Anyway, the plot of this movie is that Ethan Hunt is trying to stop the Syndicate, which is an organization of dead or missing secret agents from all over the world that are doing crimes and terrorism. And after 6 months of going rogue to try to find their leader, Solomon Lane, Ethan gets help from Simon Pegg to take him down. And Jeremy Renner gets the help of Luther to help them because the CIA has shut down the IMF and has been hunting Ethan the whole time. I don't necessarily hate the idea that the CIA wants to shut down the IMF because on paper it does sound ridiculous, but why they cast Alec Baldwin as this no-nonsense leader seems like such a waste considering Alec Baldwin has such an incredible dry comedic line delivery.
Lesbian Mario Brothers. Lemon, you look terrible. And I once watched you eat oysters while you had a cold.
Now you're having lunch? Does Avery know about this?
Lemon, the grown-up dating world is like your haircut. Sometimes awkward triangles occur.
Why put him in this movie if you're not going to make him the least bit funny? There's a line that might be a joke, I'm not sure, but I think it may be the most insane line ever said in this franchise.
Sir, Hunt is the living manifestation of destiny. Huh? And he has made you his mission.
What the hell does that mean? Is he being serious? I genuinely can't tell because he doesn't know that he's in the room with him. That seemed like kind of a confession that he secretly admires Ethan Hunt, you know? Like, what an insane line to put in this movie. I love it, but that's crazy. The masks make a return in this movie as they get a confession out of the head of the MI6 that the Syndicate is actually an organization proposed and vetoed by the Prime Minister, which has gone rogue and is the cause of all this mayhem. They also use this opportunity to get the voice control from the Prime Minister for the virtual red box that unlocks the ledger to this organization, which they can use to bait and ultimately capture Solomon Lane. I don't think Tom Cruise runs as much in this movie. I can really only remember him running towards the end of the movie. He runs with Rebecca Ferguson in the empty streets and runs and lures Solomon into a hole like a little rat. There's 2 big stunts in this movie. The first and maybe the most impressive stunt up until this point is Tom Cruise holding on the outside of a plane during takeoff. I know he had to wear special contacts so that he could see and so that the moisture wouldn't immediately leave his eyes. And the second is doing a scene entirely underwater. Apparently he was able to hold his breath for like 6 minutes. Insane. I like how in the scene he actually passes out and Rebecca Ferguson has to jump in and get him, then resuscitate him back to consciousness. He's then a bit dazed and immediately gets into a car chase, which is pretty funny because for once he's like not at the top of his game. That car chase is also incredible. And there's a great motorcycle chase and fall directly afterwards. And Tom Cruise does maybe the most impressive thing I've ever seen him do on screen towards the beginning of this movie.
What?
Seriously, do you know how much core strength you need to do that? All those other stunts Tom Cruise has done are like so big you almost can't like comprehend how technical and impressive those stunts actually are. But this is like some real world, seriously impressive. It's not even a stunt. It's just like a thing he does. It's like 5 seconds long, but that like blew me away when I first saw this. Truly, truly incredible. This guy, maybe he really is Batman. We also get to see him draw faces perfectly from memory again. This time he does a little sketch. He does 2 little sketches, I should say. His mission briefing is in a record player this time. Again, how do they get these messages in a record player? Who's doing this? I want to know. There is a spy that works for the Syndicate in this movie that looks like just a male model. Just like he'd be on the cover of Vogue or in Paris Fashion Week. Like, those cheekbones, my man, you're in the wrong industry. You should not be trying to assassinate world leaders. Speaking of that scene, they're just making guns out of anything. That male model guy makes a gun out of like a baton. Rebecca Ferguson makes a gun out of a pipe. and another guy makes a gun out of a flute. Like, they're just making guns out of anything. Honestly, I do like this movie, but not as much as the previous two. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that this one didn't really stand out to me as much as the other two. This was also the third Mission Impossible movie that I saw that day, and I don't know if I was just like mentally not prepared for this one, but maybe I'd like it more on a rewatch. Overall, I give it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now, this one to me feels like the fan favorite. This one seems to me like the one everyone loves. I could be wrong, but I just remember this movie was super popular when it came out. Still is popular, but yeah. It has that incredible fistfight scene in the bathroom. It's the first Mission Impossible to bring back a returning villain in Solomon Lane, and it has Henry Cavill, who is great in this movie. It's crazy he gets to show more range in this movie than as Superman. And speaking of Superman, this is the movie that caused the whole mustache gate with Justice League 2017. And I think Paramount made the right choice because Henry Cavill looks great with this mustache. Anyway, let's talk of the plot, because there are some key elements from the last movie that return in this one. The Syndicate has regrouped into the Apostles that are doing some big terrorism all around the world, and now they want to get their hands on some plutonium. Tom Cruise and the gang had their hands on the plutonium but lost it after the Apostles intervened and took Luther hostage for a hot second. So during round 2, Ethan Hunt assumes the identity of John Lark, who is a terrorist hired by the Apostles to buy the plutonium from an arms dealer played by Vanessa Kirby. But she only agrees to give him the plutonium if they agree to help free Solomon Lane, and Ethan Hunt is not having that. He sabotages the operation, gets Lane to his IMF boys, and still somehow doesn't blow his cover with Vanessa Kirby in the process. Fast forward, the IMF gang trick Henry Cavill into revealing that he is actually John Lark, and he's working to help Solomon Lane set off the plutonium. The masks make a brief return when they trick John Lark's nuclear specialist, Niles Delbruck, into giving them plutonium weapon blueprints by impersonating Wolf Blitzer. They try to use the masks again to impersonate who they think John Lark is, but Cavill breaks the device after he hits someone in the head with it, causing them to improvise. And of course, they use masks to trick Henry Cavill into revealing himself and his plan to the IMF boys. This might be Tom Cruise's longest running scene in the whole franchise. He's running through buildings, on buildings, in the street, and he actually breaks his foot on this shot of him jumping across the rooftop. This movie also has some incredible action. Like I said, the bathroom fight is super intense and brutal. Same with the cliff fight at the end of the movie. The stunts might be the most daring yet. The halo jump scene is absolutely mind-blowing. It appears to be all in one take, which just adds to the intensity of the scene as the altitude gets lower and lower. They had to do like 100 takes of the scene just to get it right, and there's so much technicality behind this shot, like filming right at sunset, the way Tom Cruise has to jump so he lands like 3 feet in front of the camera, all the choreography with the turns and the oxygen tank transfer, just incredible. He's also the first actor to perform a halo jump on camera. Tom Cruise also learned to fly a helicopter for this movie, and they really filmed him flying a helicopter around. This is also right after they filmed him hanging and falling from a rope attached to a helicopter. Some miscellaneous notes for this movie. This is the first time an F-bomb is said in this franchise, and it's said by none other than Henry Cavill himself.
Why'd you have to make this so fucking complicated?
I believe there's a little bit of a callback from Mission Impossible 2 because the end finale scene of this movie results in freehand rock climbing. And that's how Tom Cruise gets the edge over Henry Cavill. If that's true, I think that's a fun little callback. I think this is one of the best ones, but I did feel like it was a bit too long. This movie is like 20 to 30 minutes longer than every other movie in this franchise. I also felt like some of the story elements were a bit repetitive, like we're doing nukes again, even though we just did nukes like 2 movies ago, and the CIA doesn't trust the IMF again, even though that was kind of resolved in the last movie. But overall, I thought this movie was still really good. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And now we are on the last movie that leads into Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And wouldn't you know it, this movie is about AI, because everything is nowadays. Honestly, when they first mentioned that an AI went rogue, I rolled my eyes so hard that they almost fell out of my head. The thing that they're trying to stop in this movie is an AI called the Entity that has become sentient and can predict the future, I guess. It makes some predictions that are correct. Other than that, it doesn't really feel all that dangerous because it's like not a real thing. It's just an algorithm that's making predictions based on data that it stole. It wants to take over the world, but I'm not really sure why. They try to track down these pair of keys throughout the duration of this movie that can override the AI. The big stunt in this movie, again, is absolutely insane, but Tom Cruise rides a motorcycle off a cliff and free falls until pulling his parachute at the last second. I think Hayley Atwell is a really nice addition to this franchise. She's not a spy at all. She's just a really good thief, and I think that makes her character a lot more interesting. And I think the car chase is probably the best car chase scene I've ever seen in a movie. It's just such a creative twist, having both actors handcuffed and only allowing them to use one arm, and also switching who's driving. Of course, Tom Cruise did all of his own driving in this scene, and I was surprised to learn that Hayley Atwell drove in her scenes as well. Apparently, she studied drifting vehicles for 5 months prior to shooting. There's also such a great moment of levity where they switch cars and Ethan Hunt doesn't really know the controls. I've talked about how close he is to becoming Batman, and this scene just takes him out of his element just for a moment, and he's like, I don't know what's happening. It shows that he's human, at least a little bit, which I really enjoyed.
Hey, look, I'm sorry. This is...
It's okay.
No, this car, the way they...
It's okay.
No, the way they set them up, sometimes it's just...
Let's go.
Takes me...
Let's go.
Pretty endearing. The whole train sequence is also fantastic. And it might have been another callback to the first Mission Impossible movie where they also have a train set piece. And now for some of my miscellaneous notes. It takes 28 minutes before the title sequence. That seems like a little late, no? I mentioned how Tom Cruise is seen to be a little bit more human in this movie. Another example of that is when he's stuck in the car on the train tracks and he has the opportunity to pick his lock with a paperclip, but he doesn't have enough time. It's just faster or easier to take the entire steering wheel out of the car and, jump out of the car before he gets murdered. Another callback to the first movie, it took me a while to realize this, but they brought back this IMF leader from the first movie into this movie, which makes me think, who are we going to see in the next movie? And finally, I think Palm's nightclub outfit is super sick. She just looks dope as hell. I love it. Honestly, I do like this one, but I just don't have that much to say since it ends on a cliffhanger. So I guess we'll have to wait to see how this story is resolved. This movie is also really long. I think I prefer a tighter movie with a more definitive ending. I give it like 4 out of 5 stars. Overall, I was very surprised by how consistently good all of these movies are. Of course, I like some more than others, but I don't think I can say that any of them are bad. Even Mission Impossible 2, which is different than every other movie in this franchise, I think it's still well made and it has its charm. These movies understand suspense and tension so well, and often through action. I totally get why these movies are so popular now. These characters don't change or grow. They don't go through character arcs, but they are all archetypes that are all perfect cogs in this machine of a franchise. These movies are definitely a cut above most action movies that come out today. Definitely better than any films that The Rock or Jason Statham make, better than the recent Fast and Furious movies, and even better than a lot of superhero movies that come out. There's so much care and attention to detail that are put into these movies, which is why it takes like 3 to 5 years for them to come out. This is clearly something that Tom Cruise is super passionate about, even in his 60s, and you can tell he appreciates the fans. I think my favorite was definitely Ghost Protocol, followed closely by Mission Impossible 3, and I cannot wait to see how this journey ends with Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. But what's your favorite Mission Impossible movie? Let me know in the comments below. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.